This is a tutorial for running the lighting setup for St Mary's College Broome as of the beginning of 2022. This is the main area for those of you listening. We don't really need the computer just there. That runs all of our data projector work for class time. However, as you can see up here, we're talking about the lighting bars and the control of lighting in this tutorial. However, one very important detail from over here is this switch here. This is the main switch that turns on all of our DMX control. So the very first thing we need to do is turn those on, and they'll go through their warm-up sequence. In this cupboard is normally this laptop, which I've just placed over here for us to be able to control the light show and give you a better idea with both the screen running at the same time as this video. Normally it's here, it is plugged into power, and it is plugged into network. So when you place the laptop back in the cupboard, can you please plug in the blue cable so it can do its updating and plug in the power. Also very important, laptops eventually run out. Once you have turned the DMX switches on, the DMX runs from this USB slot just here. This panel controls all of our DMX lights just through a digital interface which sits in the cupboard. And then turn the computer on using the power button and then log in with your password. It's a special password and your teacher will give it to you. Once you have logged in, you'll be presented with this desktop here, and we use the D Pro software, this one here. The D Show player is part of that suite and we leave it here, but it's for a dedicated cue list and we don't generally use this. Once we've plugged in our USB, as we said, double click on the D Pro and it will load up the software. Now you'll notice up here it's connecting and checking that everything works. It does a self-test, and if it fails, the easiest solve is simply to close the program and then unplug the USB, turn the lights off at the mains DMX switches and restart the process. It's just easier than trying to debug. However, this one says it is ready. Now there are three panels that load up. This one here, which is showing all of our details. We don't usually use this much once we get up and running. This is our device browser, and this shows all of our lights as they are physically set up in our room. These ones over here are our moving heads. We've got two of those. This is our main light bar of fixed lights, and these ones here are our strip panels. Now the strip panels aren't normally plugged in. They sit on the ground and point whichever direction we send them to, but normally they're stored away unless you need them. And the last one, they are two side spots from over here. And normally we would run monitor live output. You can see it changes color, so we can see exactly on here which lights it thinks is supposed to be working. And over here is our library of light settings. Now these are our cue lists which you can create, and we'll talk about those later. And these are our cues. So these are the actual creation of those light settings. Now, for example, you can just double click on one and it'll bring up the properties and run some of our lights. But we're missing one important feature, and that is our show control. So if we click on show control and bring it up, this is all of our things, all of our cues that we would normally use in a show. And we've already got pre-built here, so we'll take you through those to start with. Now the EK3s are our moving heads, and if we click on one, it simply loads up that lighting cue and it uses both of them together. Now EKs are paired normally. You can run them independently if you want to, but normally they're paired. To turn them off again, just click the button and off it goes. Turn it on and they're on, off and they're off. And you'll notice that when I click it on here, these over here under the browser show that they've been turned on as well. Okay, so it's monitoring our live output. This one is our wall pan, and you'll notice on the video eventually it starts rotating through just a pan of the wall. So our naming conventions for our lights is EK3, the moving heads, and then what we want to do in just a brief turn of phase. Now you'll notice I can turn this on and off as per usual, as before, and turn it off, but DMX allows us to do something reasonably unique. For example, if we start with our center special and then we want to quickly change down to our randomized array, see how we can have both of these turned on. Now this is really useful because it maintains in memory this section, but it's doing the last one we turned on. And you can see it works quite well as a pre-show, just to splash all our randomized gobos around. Now if we were to click this button here, it would drop straight back to the previous setting. So we could turn this on and it goes straight to our pans, and then click it off again and it will go back to our previous setting. Okay, moving on to these ones here. PL1 is just our main light bar, and we've got a few broad brush strokes, so to speak. If you turn that one on, it lights the whole stage in white. Obviously red changes it all to red. You can turn off white in the process, and you can see how it changes the tint, so they build. And these are our pre-builds. You'll notice I'm clicking on one first and then turning off the other. That is a wonderful way of building in a nice fade. But you can just fade them straight down and then just fade them straight back up. It depends on the lighting effect you're after. Okay, and last but not least, these are defaults for our strip lights, which you can put on the side in a strip and control with these presets here. And you can sort of read through and pretty much guess and try out whichever ones you like. There are a few specials for our EK3. So over here we had the center special, and that dropped and lights up our kangaroo over there. We do have some pre-built spotlights. So this one's stage left and it lights up the dice. This one is stage right and it lights that one there. There's also a center forward. Now the EK center forward is not going to show up the kangaroo. It's going to move forward. Still sort of lights up the kangaroo, but it's actually 1 meter forward from where it's supposed to be. And that's to help us out when we close the second line of curtains, if you want to have an announcer there before the beginning of the show. We also have mezzanine spots that we've pre-built in. So if you've got performers performing from the mezzanine, you probably can't see that on the video, but they've turned up and pointed to the center of the mezzanine, the left of the mezzanine, and then the right of the mezzanine. And they're most of our pre-builds. However, what you need to do is learn how to use these ones, but you also need to learn how to create your own cue lists. If you look over here and scroll down our cues, you can see some cue lists that students have made. Okay, this is a cue list from last year. Now these are individual cues which were then joined together to create a cue list. And I'll just turn this one off here. For example, they still work if we double click one, it opens up what the queue is, but also if you look on the video, you can see what color and what lighting effect that one was here. And we'll talk about this one in a sec. So each one, you just double click and it loads up the pre-built that someone has already built into. Now, these don't stay forever. They're usually deleted at the end of each year to allow the next year's students to build their own queues. But for this one, we'll talk about the easiest way to modify a queue. You'll notice up here, it's got save as and save as a palette. Queue is all we need to start about. If you want to save as a palette, I would highly recommend you reading the manual for D Pro, which is available. Your teacher will put it on a OneNote somewhere, and it's just digitally available for anyone to use. But let's talk about our controls for this queue, and we're going to modify this queue because it's no longer needed. It was for last year's events, and you can see you've got the colours, red, green, blue, and they're currently at 255, so they're as bright as they can be here. They can go from 0 to 255 following the RGB spectrum, or you can use this one over here to change the colours and see how it does it natively. It will show you in real time here, but it's also doing it on the video. Okay, so you can see the effect as you create them, which is why we're using this software. Now, this is obviously our colour bar to choose which colour we like, and then you've got colour value into the blue or white, and then to darken it or lighten it. And you'll see how these interact down here to give you numbers if you need to write them down somewhere so you can remember them for later. So, more white in your colour, more colour in your colour, and darker or lighter. And you can see how it changes these ones here. And you can simply click and choose to get to where you need to be. Let's say we want a nice, I don't know, green's a good colour. Once you've got that, you have a couple of other bits and pieces in here that we need to consider. The dimmer, currently it's on 100%, so the lights are working at 100% of their capability, and you can turn them down or up as well. So you can also choose where to leave the light one. So if you only want a subtle effect, leave it down a bit lower. If you're going for the full big effect, you can turn it up to 100%. And that gets stored in the information when you save it as well. Yes, the same effect can be achieved here, but this is a brightness quotient of the actual light behind the colour, whereas this just chooses the individual colour. Once you've got this to a colour that you like, this is already a queue saved. And so if I click save here, it will overwrite the previous settings. But you can just save it as a new queue. And I'd recommend that if you're modifying other people's queues. Save as, give it a new queue name. Can't read in the dark. And then just save it. So there's my first queue done. Now I have modified that queue to be my new queue. See, new B up here. Here's the actual statistics for DMX and the channels it uses. This part's pretty irrelevant for you guys, unless you're going to an old school DMX board, of course. And then you can just close it and your new queue will be available down here, new B. Now the one we originally mucked around with, well, that still works. It's still there, it's still in its original form. But new B, which you've just created, is your new queue. All right, so after you've made all of your queues, and your queues can have a combination. They don't have to just be one thing. They can also use the moving heads. You simply just grab them by selecting them and adding them into the queue. Let's bring them up. Let's put them somewhere important. There we go. And see how it's now added channel 11 with all of that there, and I can just add that to the queue as well. Now I've got new B, save as a queue, I've already got it, so I can just hit save at this point and it adds that to that list. However, running a whole show out of this list over here can get quite painful. So what you can do is add them to the show control, like these ones here. So for a basic show, this is last year's show, have a look at them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so running them, it's just a matter of clicking, moving to the next one, moving to the next one, moving to the next one, and it slowly builds up over time, and you can turn these ones off afterwards, and that's fine. And see how it moves down here and moves along the queue here, and it goes through all of them there. And we've also got some extra special ones over there so that we didn't have to flick backwards and forwards between pages. To do that's easy enough actually. Grab and drop, and it just drops it in as a button, and then there's the queue. This ends the first section of your tutorial, and we'll show you about queue lists in the next tutorial.